Elvis Presley was the king of rock and roll, a global sensation whose name echoed through sold-out arenas and adoring crowds. But what if I told you that behind the dazzling lights and roaring applause, success wasn't just his greatest achievement, it was the very thing that tore his world apart? Priscilla Presley, the woman who stood by his side, once called their love story a real-life nightmare. But why? What happened behind closed doors that turned passion into pain? What dark truths lurked beneath the glamour of his fame? Stay with us as we uncover the shocking revelations that changed everything. At first, Priscilla Presley couldn't have been prouder. Watching Elvis reclaim his throne as the king of rock and roll was nothing short of exhilarating. His career was surging to new heights, and she was right there beside him, soaking in the energy of his performances, witnessing firsthand the raw power he had over a crowd. She admired his dedication, his relentless pursuit of perfection, and the way his music could move thousands in a single moment. Every show felt like a triumph, a reminder of why the world had fallen in love with him in the first place. But as the cheers grew louder and the spotlight burned brighter, something shifted. The man she had always known, the one who once looked at her with warmth and affection, seemed to be slipping away. Their time together became more fleeting, their conversations more strained. She traveled with him whenever she could, but even then, she felt like a spectator rather than a partner. Elvis was still present, but he was no longer there. The more successful he became, the more distant he grew. His world became consumed by the high of the stage, the adoration of millions, and the relentless demands of fame. And slowly, Priscilla began to realize she wasn't just sharing Elvis with the world, she was losing him to it. Las Vegas was supposed to be a new chapter, a fresh start for Elvis Presley's career, one that Priscilla initially embraced with excitement. The energy of the city, the sold-out shows, the standing ovations, it all felt like proof that Elvis was exactly where he was meant to be. In the beginning, he seemed almost overwhelmed by the audience's reaction, touched by the unwavering love they still had for him after all these years. For a moment, it was as if he was transported back to the early days of his career, reliving the magic of his first meteoric rise to fame. But soon, that humility faded, replaced by something else entirely. As the adoration of the crowds grew, so did the distance between Elvis and the world outside of his performances. Priscilla watched as he became less of the man she once knew and more of the untouchable icon that the world worshipped. The thrill of being adored night after night fueled him in ways nothing else could. He carried himself differently, more confident, more invincible, but at the same time, more detached. The Elvis that once found comfort in quiet moments with his family now seemed restless when the curtains closed. The roar of the audience became his lifeline, while the stillness of home became suffocating. Priscilla could feel the shift every time he walked through the door. The vibrant, electrified performer who commanded a stage with ease was now distant, lost, as if he were stuck between two realities. The energy of the stage gave him purpose, but the silence of real life left him unsettled. No matter how hard she tried, Priscilla couldn't compete with the high of his performances, and deep down, she feared she was watching him slip further into a world where she no longer belonged. Priscilla Presley had always known that Elvis belonged to the world. From the moment she fell in love with him, she accepted that millions adored him, that his presence alone could send an entire stadium into a frenzy. But what she hadn't anticipated was how it would feel to become just another face in the crowd. Every night, as thousands of screaming fans reached for him, their voices drowning out everything else, she began to realize that she was no longer his refuge. She was just part of the background noise. The man she once had all to herself was now consumed by a world that worshipped him, a world she could never truly be part of. "How do you replace the adoration of an entire audience?" she later wrote, reflecting on the painful realization that no matter how much she loved him, it would never be enough. The high of the stage, the deafening applause, the endless sea of faces that hung on his every word. It was intoxicating, something she could never compete with. When the lights went down and the music stopped, she had hoped he would come back to her, to their family, to the life they had built together. But instead, he pulled further away, retreating into a world where she felt more like an outsider than a wife. The more he performed, the more he stayed away. What began as short trips turned into extended absences. At first, she told herself it was just the demands of his career, that he needed time to decompress after the adrenaline rush of performing. But deep down, she knew there was more to it. Home was no longer a place of comfort for Elvis. It was a reminder of the quiet reality he was beginning to resent. The warmth of their family, the simple joys of everyday life, the responsibilities of being a husband and father, none of it could match the thrill of the stage. And so, he avoided it. Vegas became his escape, and the city welcomed him with open arms. He lingered there for days, sometimes even weeks, long after the final encore had faded. The same walls that had once held laughter and love now held only echoes of what used to be. Each time he stayed away, Priscilla felt the weight of his absence grow heavier, the space between them widening until she could no longer recognize the man she had once given her heart to. When Elvis did return home, it was never the peaceful reunion Priscilla had hoped for. The excitement of the stage, the deafening applause, the energy that surged through him after every performance, it all disappeared the moment he stepped through the door. In its place was a restless, uneasy man, someone who seemed lost in the stillness of ordinary life. He would pace the house, unable to sit still for long, as if searching for something that wasn't there. The thrill of the spotlight had become his oxygen, and without it, he struggled to breathe. Priscilla could see it in his eyes, the growing disconnect, the frustration of a man who felt trapped between two worlds. Desperate to keep up with the demands of his career and the emotional toll it was taking on him, Elvis turned to pills. Priscilla later revealed that he was using dexedrine, a stimulant meant to help control his weight, but it did far more than that. It kept him awake when he should have rested, wired when he should have slowed down, numbing him to the exhaustion and emptiness that lurked beneath the surface. She watched helplessly as he relied more and more on medication to push through the long nights, to fill the void that even the roar of an audience couldn't quite satisfy. But the drugs didn't just keep him going, they changed him. The man who had once been full of life, full of passion, had become unpredictable. His moods would shift without warning, one moment affectionate, the next withdrawn and irritable. He was temperamental, prone to sudden outbursts of frustration over the smallest things. At times, it felt as though he wasn't even there at all, lost in his own thoughts, detached from the world around him. Priscilla wanted to reach him, to pull him back from the edge, but with each passing day, it became more and more clear. Elvis wasn't just struggling, he was slipping away. Priscilla did everything she could to bring a sense of normalcy back into their lives. She planned vacations, hoping that time away from the flashing lights and deafening crowds would give them a chance to reconnect. She imagined quiet getaways, just the two of them, escaping the madness of fame and finding solace in each other's company. But no matter how hard she tried, she could never seem to reach him. Elvis didn't want quiet. He didn't want normal. The very idea of slowing down, of facing the stillness of reality, seemed unbearable to him. Instead of romantic escapes, he surrounded himself with his entourage, his trusted circle of friends and colleagues who kept the party going, ensuring that the chaos never stopped. Priscilla could see it in his eyes. Elvis was slipping further into a world she couldn't follow. The man who once craved connection, who had once looked at her like she was the center of his universe, now seemed completely untethered. He was lost, she admitted, her words heavy with the realization that she was no longer his anchor. The thrill of the stage had given him a purpose, but when the lights went down, when the curtains closed, He didn't know who he was anymore, and the more he felt that emptiness creeping in, the harder he fought to escape it. But Elvis wasn't just running from the pressures of his career, he was running from himself. Every late-night gathering, every trip that stretched on for weeks, every moment spent chasing the high of his fame, it was all a distraction from a reality he didn't want to face. The man who once commanded the stage with unwavering confidence was now a prisoner of his own success, unable to find peace anywhere except in the fleeting moments of adoration that came with every performance. And as Priscilla watched the man she loved disappear into the chaos, she couldn't help but wonder, was there anything left of the Elvis she once knew? At first, Priscilla held on to hope. She believed that if she just tried hard enough, if she remained patient, if she adjusted to his world, if she loved him through the chaos, things would get better. But over time, the truth became impossible to ignore. Elvis's success hadn't just put distance between them. It had shattered the very foundation of their marriage. The man she had once built a life with was no longer present in the world they had created together. His heart belonged to the stage, to the screaming fans, to the rush of adoration that no single person could ever compete with. No matter how much she loved him, she was always going to be second to the demands of his fame. His need for excitement, the relentless pursuit of something bigger, something more thrilling, had consumed every part of his existence. A quiet night at home, a simple dinner as a family, these things no longer held meaning for him. He craved the energy, the chaos, the spectacle of being Elvis Presley. And when the applause faded and the curtains closed, he searched for other ways to fill the void, turning to the people who kept his world spinning, to the excesses that numbed the loneliness he refused to face. The more he chased the high of his career, the less space there was for a real, ordinary life. And with that, there was less space for Priscilla. Despite everything, despite the history they shared and the love that still lingered between them, the reality was undeniable. This wasn't a life that could be sustained. Priscilla had fought for their marriage, had given everything to stand by him, but in the end, she was standing beside a man who was no longer there. Elvis Presley belonged to the world, and there was no place for her in it. Letting go wasn't just painful, it was inevitable. And as she walked away, she wasn't just leaving behind a husband. She was leaving behind a love story that had been swallowed whole by the very thing that made him a legend. Priscilla's words paint a heartbreaking picture of a man who seemed to have everything: fame, fortune, and millions of adoring fans, yet lost the one thing that mattered most: his family. Elvis Presley's success made him a legend, but did it also make him a prisoner of his own fame? Do you think he ever truly regretted what happened? Was there a moment when he wished he could turn back time and choose a different path? We want to hear your thoughts. Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the untold side of Elvis Presley's life, don't forget to hit that like button and share this video with other Elvis fans. And if you haven't already, subscribe to our channel for more incredible revelations, hidden stories, and behind-the-scenes truths about the king of rock and roll. Turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. We have so much more to uncover.